Welcome to iPen Podcast, Interviews and Conversations. Here we bring entrepreneurs and their business to their audience and communities as well as ours. We welcome and connect with them to share who they are and what they do. Authors, entrepreneurs, we extend the invitation to promote your business here on our podcast and in iPen Magazine. Your article, your story, your promotions, how you can connect with others, a new audience, a quarterly magazine presented online for all to view and subscribe to. For articles, ads, and subscriptions, please contact ipendesigns@gmail.com. For your viewing, you can see past articles, past interviews on www.NanetteMBuchanan.com. Welcome to the show. Good evening, good evening, good evening. My name is Nanette Buchanan, and welcome to iPen Podcast, Interviews and Conversations. I'd like to say, hey, happy spring. Are we ready for it? I heard they had snow still in some areas, rain in other areas, tornadoes in other areas. So I'm just going to say happy spring and hope the weather hears me, or Mother Nature. So I want to welcome all of you to our show. Tonight's guest is pretty intense. I'd say that. He's bringing some things that I don't know. We're going to have to question exactly who he is, because people that write this type of stuff on purpose, the mystery, the suspense, the thrills, the chills. When I was coming up, it was chiller. How about you, Felice, my partner in crime? What do you think about those type of authors
that write you can't steer our guest away?
Yeah, that
before he even comes on. He looks harmless.
I have to. I've always wondered, like the inner workeings of someone with that kind of, at any rate.
I'm curious too. But hey, everyone. Good evening. How's everyone? I hope everyone is well. I love that we do these on Mondays because, it gives me, most people don't really look forward to Monday, but I do.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. I do too. I look forward to Mondays because every Monday we get to meet a new person, and we get to know a little bit about them and get to know what they do and why they do what they do. But again, this guest here, I'm telling you, I actually thought, well, maybe I'll tell you after he comes on.
Yeah,
I'll let him come on first. I'll tell you about my first impression when I walked up to his table. I'll let you know. Let you know. So I want to welcome to our platform an author, prolific writer, because he's got books after books after books after books, but intense. I would say I've read a couple of the reviews about his books, and oh my, okay. Author Stuart, Jaffe, welcome to the stage, sir. Welcome to our stage tonight. Come join us, sir. Come join us.
We he looks so harmless. All you say are lies.
Yes. He's like you sit next to him in a movie theater, and you're pointing to the screen, and all of a sudden you turn and look and go, "Oh my God, he's sitting right here." But I am so happy that you decided to join us, sir.
Yay!
I'm honored.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Before I have you do what we normally have them do, I just want the audience to know that I met Mr. Jaffe at a book signing in Greensboro. Here, they had a book signing at the library, and we all were set up, and our books were there, and I kept walking by this table that was full of books because I just assumed they were the library books. All of these books, it had to be the library's display. So I kept walking by and introducing myself to other authors, and I noticed he was standing there. And I said, well, wait a minute. I didn't introduce myself to this man here. Where's his table? Because I still thought that the books that were on the table were the library. When I tell you he has series after series after series,
Wow.
fantasy, thrillers, mystery. And I gotta get this series that he's got going now. I gotta get into it because I'm hoping that I don't have to put it down and go, oh, wait a minute. I want to be able I want to be able to get through the suspense of it and the thrill of it because of the simple fact that I'm not really a horror reader or sci-fi reader, but I love a good murder mystery, suspense, thriller. I love those type of books. So, Mr. Jaffe, before you tell us that book is exactly what I want, please do what we ask all our guests to do because we don't want to short you in any way. Introduce yourself, sir.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Stuart Jaffe. I'm best known as the author of this, the Max Porter Paranormal Mysteries. But as Annette said, I've written tons and tons of stuff. It all goes under the umbrella of science fiction and fantasy, but all different kinds, everything from contemporary fantasies to high fantasy to thrillers with fantasy twists, some science fiction, some time travel stuff. And I've written over 60, well, I guess it's getting close to 70 some books now, which does sound like a lot, and it is a lot, but I'm also old, so I've been just doing it a long, long time. So it adds up over time. That's just the way it is. I've met, I will speak at schools and or to groups of new writers, and they'll see all those books and they're like, oh my goodness, and I'm like, relax, because there was a time, if you went back 20 years, where I sat at my table and I only had one or two books out. It's just every year you just keep getting more and more if you stick to it. And so we don't have to be all mystified by it. It's just time. That's why I've written so many books. Time.
Okay, now, and again, you're not that old, but 70 books, that is incredible.
Well,
Awesome. Okay, so take it from a person that has not written one. 70? Wow. Because just to be able to have that mindset, that creative that keeps coming up with new stories or plots or whatever. But that's very impressive. So I know it's normal for you. It's not paranormal. It's normal for you. for a person like me, I'm like, wow, how could? Yeah, that's incredible. So, and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Again,
well, my questions begin with what you left off with. You said, you've done over 70 books, and it does take time. And after you learn the process, you just follow the process again and again and again and again. The process is almost like a machine. If you cut it on, you expect it to work, and it works. Every now and then you might have to add a new part. Every now and then you might have to, tweak up what you've been doing. But for the most part, it's the same routine every time you do it. So I ask simply, how much time do you spend? And I always say this because when I talk to people that want to write, and they tell me that it took them 10 years to write, their own book. And I tell them it didn't take you 10 years. You've been hesitating. You have not been doing what you can do. Because for me, it started with 15 minutes a day, and then it went to 2 hours a day. So now I'm at maybe 4 or 5 hours because I'm doing different things, but it's all coupled into the art of writing, whatever I need to do for writing. So we learn that time helps. Setting aside that time and being able to have that time honed in. So what is your time that you set aside to write other than family, other than other things, when you find yourself in that writing mode, what is your time?
So I'm a full-time author,
Mm-hmm.
which ironically means I have less and less time to write, and I have to spend more of my time uh, uh, running a business. So what
Wait a
I
minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Say that again for the people in the back that don't hear you say that writing is a business. Did you
if you want to have a career, it's a business. Yeah.
It's a
So
business.
so there
Okay.
when you're a writer, you have to wear two hats and not at the same time. You have the
Mm-hmm.
artist hat. That's the one that got you into writing. That's the one you wear when you're writing, when you're creating and trying to be creative. The rest of the time, you're wearing a business hat. You have to manage your finances. You have to arrange uh, any kind of touring you're going to do, shows you're going to go to, events like the Greensboro Library event that I met you at. That
Mm-hmm.
well, I had to go out and find out about it, apply to it, get it accepted, show up. Had to manage my inventory, so I knew what to bring. All of that. Of course, marketing of all different kinds, including reaching out and being on a show like this. This is all part of the business,
Mm-hmm.
and you will find for those people who are dream of being a full-time writer, they think that it means they'll just get to write all day. and
Mm-hmm.
and no, every professional full-time author I know, the hardest thing about the job is finding time to write.
Wow.
It's just always that way, and learning how to carve out that time and realize that that's if you don't do that time, then you have nothing to promote. So you need to
Yeah.
actually put that time in. Um, and as far as my process, my schedule goes, it changes throughout. It's changed throughout my life, depending on
Mm-hmm.
my life, what my life calls for. I have
Mhm,
a 27-year-old son. When he was an 8-year-old son,
mhm,
that
mhm.
made a lot of different time requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But now it's just me and my wife in this house. So now I wake up in the morning, usually between 6 and 6:30, and the first hour of my day
Mhm,
is I usually spend anywhere from 15 minutes to a half hour reading
mhm,
um, fiction, and then I'll spend a minimum of the next half hour writing.
mhm.
If it's a bad day, it'll be a half hour. If it's a good day, like today, I wrote for about an hour and got 1,000 words done. So I was like,
Wow.
and that's the key, is that even if I only get 200 words, if I write basically two paragraphs,
Mhm,
and that's all I get out in the morning because of things like tomorrow I have an electrician coming to do some work in the morning. I probably will not get as much time to write in the morning.
mhm,
But if the rest of the day goes bad tomorrow, the electrician's only supposed to be here a few hours, maybe it becomes an all day affair, as we know can
mhm,
happen. At least I can go to bed knowing I got 200 more words written on the book, because it's
Mm-hmm.
all about momentum, keeping it moving. What
mhm.
you don't want when you're writing a book is for things to just stop.
Yeah.
That it's so hard to get that ball rolling again. So,
Mhm.
and then of course I have deadlines, so that makes me have to keep moving as well.
I,
But at the very least, I have that time in the morning, and then hopefully, usually after lunch, I might be able to get some more time in, and then at the very late end of the day, before I go to bed, I read and write again.
okay.
And
Mm-hmm.
so
Mhm.
that way, throughout the day, I usually get anywhere from 1 to 2,000 words done, and that gets me on track to finishing the book on time.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I need to know how it all started. Where did it all begin? Were you terrified as a young child, and then to overcome your fear, you just started writing about it? But no, tell us your story.
So I know you're all like paranormal and it's kind of spooky. The stuff I write, I mean, I love horror, and I actually am working on a horror book with an illustrator that hopefully someday will come out. But most of my books are not. I don't think they're that scary. I do have readers who think that because these paranormal mysteries involve ghosts and things and witches, and so there are always there are plenty of scenes in graveyards and things like that. people, I have had people feel that's kind of spooky, but I don't know where my love of horror came from. It's always been there. Um, to my earliest memories are just loving horror movies, horror books, horror comics, all of that stuff. Um, my early reading where I first started enjoying reading on my own was science fiction with Robert Heinlein, and that came from my best friend at the time when I was just a kid. He was reading that stuff, and I was like, all right, I'll give it a try, and I slowly got into it. And I was not an avid reader as a kid. I didn't not read, and there was my brother read, my father has always been a reader, so it was around me, and I'd read, but I didn't like gravitate towards it. And then when I was later in my teens, I started. I read Pet Cemetery, Stephen King's Pet Cemetery. That got me going, and so then I started reading more and more. But again, I would like, just come in and out of it. It was never like an addiction until I was my senior year in high school. I was living with my father at the time, and we were cleaning out the garage, and there was a box of books. And in there, of all things, it was a nonfiction book, but John Steinbeck wrote a nonfiction book called Travels with Charlie, which is him traveling around the country with his dog, Charlie. And this just fascinated me. And after that, I read some Steinbeck on my own, and I started to learn and realize, literature is actually really good if I'm not being forced to read it for a high school class that I don't, if I get to pick out what I want, I'm just having the experience instead of being told I have to figure out all the deep meaning, and that just got the ball rolling, and it never really stopped.
Nice.
So that was the reading part and how I kind of got into this. And then the writing, I'd always on and off, I'd write short stories and things, just mostly for myself. But even in high school and in English class, if we wanted to, we could write a short story for a contest. I wrote one. It was a horror story. I mean, go figure, and I got like second place or something. And so, but even that happened, and I didn't think, I'm a writer. I just thought, that was kind of cool. And I went to college. Undergrad was a theater degree in directing theater. I wanted to be a movie director and all that. And I started writing plays at that time, just so I could kind of force myself into the director role. Because it was tough, there's a lot of competition and other students. And I was like, hey, if I write it and I can get the school to produce it, and I can just say, well, I'm going to be the director. I wrote it. So, and that worked. that snuck me in there. And I again, everything was kind of very slowly happening until right out of college, I just got the bug I wonder if I could write a novel. And I knew I could write a short story. I'd written plenty of them by that point. Never submitted anything. I'd write them for classes or for my own amusement. And so I was curious if I could write a novel. So I knew I could write a short story, and I thought, well, I know I could write a page a day. And at that time I didn't know, but a page was about 250 words, 300 words. But I knew I could write a single page in a day's work somewhere along in the course of a day. If I just committed to doing that once a day for a year, at the end of the year, I'd have a 365-page book or manuscript, and hopefully it would make sense and be a book. And so that's what I did. And when I finished it, obviously it's a horrible, horrible, crappy book, but I did it. And it's like anything. Once you've climbed the mountain once, you're like, it was hard, but it wasn't impossible because I did it. And then and then the bug's really there. Now it's like, I want to do it again. But now that I've done it once, I know I could do so much better if I just did this instead and did this. And then slowly, little by little, you kind of build up your skills and flash 30 some years later, and here I am.
That's awesome. That is really awesome.
Yeah. And I think the idea of it is for each author to know that it's most people believe, and I don't know why. I guess it's that thing that they see on television, and it's the fantasy and the ideology of how it's made. People don't understand it. Some movies take 3-4 years to
Mhm.
develop. Some books take 3-4 years to develop it. But when you see it, you automatically figure, well, it's only 300 pages, so it couldn't have taken them 3 or 4 years to do this.
Right.
It's only cinematography and films and everything. It couldn't have taken them 3 or 4 years to get this done until you see the breakdown and someone speaking, such as yourself, such as what we do, and saying the time that's consumed and the things, because you still got to live from day to
Right.
day. I'm quite sure
Yeah.
in the 30 years you had to take a pause somewhere and say, well, wait a minute, I got the sniffles. Let me go and rest a bit.
Right.
My wife is
Sure.
not
Sure.
feeling well. My kids are not feeling well. I got to go to the school play and see my kid in the play, or go to a sporting event, and or spend time with my family. So
Yeah.
there's some things that do interrupt the pen and pad sensation that we get, and people don't understand that. They constantly, I know you write series and seem to have a knack for it. I wrote one series and I've been trying to get out of it for the last couple of years because it's a it's almost like I'm beginning to duck people. I'm beginning to duck those that are saying, oh, did you get the next book out? Did you get
Oh,
the you,
that never. Right. So I have this. This is the 19th book in this series. This just came.
Wow. Mm-mm.
oh, he's glitched.
Yeah. Hopefully that will come back in just a moment. That's incredible. The 19th book in it.
Yes, the 19
That
in one series,
in that series.
and that
Oh,
series,
goodness.
and that's the thing that really, really, really. I don't know if you could hear me, Stuart. I'm going to remove you from the platform. You might need to sign back in.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
the thing about it is when it's a series like that.
Mhm.
Like I said, when you're doing repetitive series, and we know,
Mhm.
I think our first and foremost thought is television series.
Mhm.
We
Yeah.
see the television series, and we know that the television series comes back on, and we're good with it. So we
Mhm.
try to think of that when you're thinking of writing. So he has 19 of this book, and continue what you were saying, Stuart, about
I was just saying that long, at least 10 books back, if not before that, it got to the point, and it happens this time now, is that I knew the day the book would come out, somebody by the end of the day would email me. And sure enough, it happened. And, the fan says, got the new book, read it, loved it. When's the next one? And it's
no.
the day the book came out. I'm like,
Wow.
you're
Wow.
going to have to wait. It'll
Yeah.
come out eventually,
Yeah.
but it ain't going to be tomorrow,
Right,
How do
right,
you
right. And
But
that
there are
and,
people
and
who
track
just read.
though? How do you keep track of from that your I guess your I don't know, your person of the book, your character. That's the word I'm looking for. That's I would imagine there's 19 different kind of scenarios, different things that are happening. So how do you
Mhm.
keep track that you haven't gone back and not kind of made a similar? I
Yeah.
don't want to say repeat yourself, but how do you keep track of that? Because
The answer is I'm terrible at it. I'm terrible at it. It is the hard. It is, especially the longer the series the run. I had I
Mhm.
known what I was doing, this series is 12, 13 years now that it's been running.
Mhm.
So had I known back then what I know now, I would have
Mhm.
started like a what they call a series Bible. You just start
Mhm. Yeah,
keeping track of everything and and
definitely.
and all
Yeah.
that. But I never did that. So
Mhm.
I mean, I at minimum I do one of these a year and sometimes two.
Mhm.
So it stays pretty fresh in my mind at least, and I try and make sure the characters keep growing. so that they're not the same people they were way back when.
Mhm.
In order to keep a series this long fresh, I mean, all the bad guys from the early books are long gone, and I make new bad guys and keep things rolling that way. So I only really have to keep in my head the last like couple books, not the whole series.
Right, right.
However, I've told this story before, but there was one point before my son graduated high school and moved out. There was one point I'd written one of the books. This is, I forget how many books we are talking about, but quite a lot. And he's reading. My wife and my son are they're my alpha readers. So uh, he's reading it and he's like, "Oh, I really enjoyed it." He goes, he's like, "I was wondering if you're ever going to get back to that thing from book 4." I'm like, "What thing?" And he goes, "Well, in that book, or I don't, I say book 4, I don't remember, but there was a book way back where I had this moment where this one character alluded to something, right? Some mysterious
Mhm.
thing." And I did it on purpose with the idea that, in a couple books later, I would address that.
Right.
And he's bringing it up, and it's been like 6 or 7 books or whatever. So, and I looked at him, and I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, when this, and he said, I went, "Oh, I completely forgot." I said, "That's going to be the next book."
Oh, very good. Very good.
So that,
Yeah,
and that one I had to go
yeah,
back and find where it
yeah.
happened and reread the whole, chapter
And
again to get it in my head.
we fall in with our audience, whatever attracts them, we try to keep them on the track. We try to
Right.
make sure that they're hearing what we're writing, but they're also so into it that they try to predict what's next,
Right.
or they're looking for the next, connection that you're going to make. So your son made that connection immediately, saying, "Hey, what happened? You left this little wing over here,
Yeah.
and I want to know what happened to that wing."
Right.
Well, have you ever found yourself? And I ask this because, like I said, I only have, well, I have two. I have a stumble upon series. And I say stumble upon because I didn't think it was a series. I still don't think it is a series, but I'm releasing book 4 sometime this year. But I didn't think it was a series. But something really, really, and I've asked other authors, and they go, "No, never. I don't know." But you, being a series writer, maybe you can answer it for me. Have you ever found yourself saying, and not so much in the Max Porter books that you have, because you're on number 19, so we know that you went well beyond that. But have you ever got to the end of the book and said, "Well, this is where the story, I wanted it to go here. I'm here.
Right.
The story is done." And then something hits you the next day and says, "No, it's not."
I haven't had that specific thing. There's all different kinds of things that'll happen with the series, and
Right.
there are plenty. Most of the series that I write, I plan them to. They're meant to be a small thing. This
Do
series
you
was.
already know, when you say you meant them to be a small thing, do you already know how many books are going to be in the series?
I can roughly. Well, now I can roughly guess.
Oh,
So,
okay.
like here, this is the last thing I put out before the one I just showed you. This is a new science fiction series called The Pathway Ring, and this is the first book,
Uh-huh.
Pioneers of the Pathway. I'm working on the second right now.
Mm.
It is going to be 4 to 5 books. I don't know exactly how many,
Okay.
but it will be
Okay.
between 4 and 5 books, and I have a rough idea of how that's
Now,
going to go.
how do you know that though?
Well, this one has a long story. So
Okay.
this
Okay.
series started over 10 years ago,
Okay.
uh, where I had an idea, and well, even longer than 10 years ago. I had this idea, and I kept trying to write it, and I couldn't. I couldn't. It just would fall apart. I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
I know now looking back, I just didn't have the skills to pull off what was in my head, and I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
how to do it. And then a bunch of years later, after I'd been writing for a while, I was like, I'm going to try it again. And I wrote it, and I wrote it as a standalone novel. And it's the only novel where I'm presented it to my wife and my son, and about uh, I read my drafts out loud to my wife. So my son was just
Mhm.
listening in on it as well.
Mhm.
And about halfway through, they were both just peppering me with all these questions. They were so confused, and it was clear it was not working. And it's the only time I've ever never gotten to the end of reading something to them. So I took all these notes from them, and I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to let this sit for a year. I got all these other things I'm scheduled to write. Next year, I'll come back to it. And eventually I got to a point, I had an opening in my schedule. I'm like, I got to get back to that book. So I went and I pulled up the book, and it had been 5 years had
Oh,
gone
wow.
by.
Mm.
And I'm like, oh, but I read through that rough draft or that draft of the book, and I realized everything that was wrong with it. And part of it was I was trying to cram a much larger story into this little space.
Right.
And
Right.
so you know, looking at now, I now have the skills and the knowledge that I was able to attack it and figure out how to make what I was trying to do work. And so,
Right.
so I actually have, if you think of that first book as an enormous outline,
Mm.
that's what I have. And and then I kind of broke that up, and then filled in the pieces that weren't in the book. And that's why I can say that one's about 4 to 5 books.
Well, the reason why I asked was because, like I said, I had no idea. And you're right. Sometimes you go and you go and you go, and then you say, you know what, this is bigger than what I thought it was. I did that with my very first book. With my very first book, I wrote over 700 pages. And I was like, well, wait a minute. This is my first book. No one knows who I am. How is this going to work out? So I split it in two purposely for the reader, for the reader, to keep the readers, you know, and we have to do that as authors. We have to keep the readers where we know, hey, they're going to pick this book up and they're going to look at it and go, oh no, she don't know what she's doing. 700 something pages. What is this? So I broke the book down to two. The story caught on. People enjoyed the story. There were some that thought it was about them, but the story caught on. So the story caught on, and immediately I said the story was over. It was my very first book. I'm done. As a matter of fact, I was so done that I thought, I'm not writing anything else. This is it. I've spit out everything that was in me is out. I can't do this again. And people came back and asked me, well, where is the next book? And I do like you. I read to my husband, and he is my first reader. I read the drafts to him, and his thing was, wow, you need to write another book. And I'm looking at him like he had 4 heads. No, I'm not writing another book. I'm not going to do that because I want to keep the readers. And I did poetry and children's books. I don't do novels. This is not what I do. But the reason that I asked that question was because I got to the end of, they conned me into the third book, write the third book. Okay. So I wrote the third book, and I got to the end of the third book, and something kicked me in the head and said, no, this is not it. You got to do a fourth book. You got to do a fourth book. So that's why I was asking.
So, yeah, no, I get you. So, that, I got bad news for you, Nanette. Keeping the readers means you're going to be writing series. I've written standalone books, and
let me move this tag off of here. You talking about keeping the readers is gonna
but it's true. I've written standalone books, and there are outlier authors who, either because of their specific genre or however they've gotten away with it, they can write standalone books and make a living off of it. But the truth is, I'll pull. I have my mailing list, and so I'll pull thousands of readers and say, next, do you want me to write another this, another that? What are you looking for next year? And I'll get like 30% of them. He's like, we want standalone. Okay, I write a standalone. Nobody buys it. Right? People, we've all grown up with television. And now film, like with the MCU and things, these films get all interconnected. People invest their time and energy in your characters, and they don't want to let go. And that's what happens. And so artistically, it makes sense. But remember, we talked about the two hats. The business hat says, if you want to make money, if you want to have a career, like it or not, the artist in you needs to figure out how to make the series work, because the series is where it's at. I make half my income is the Max Porter series. All my other series don't equate half to this. Half of it is all of this. That's why it's my longest running series, and it's why I tell my fans I will not stop until you tell me to stop, right? Because I figure if I start phoning it in, or if they get bored with it for any reason, they will let me know, both directly by writing me and telling me, stop, or the sales will just die. And thankfully, that's not the case. Thankfully, I don't know how it happens, but I put out this 19th book, and I get all these emails saying this is the best one yet, and I'm, that just makes my heart pitter patter.
Right. Yeah, I feel that way too. My Mince family has grown into a whole another thing. That family just turned into something else. And then I have a crime mystery 2-book series. Damian Tyson is the investigator, and now that has sparked the audience. And like you said, now that I'm willing to go along with and roll with, because I love mystery and suspense and crime.
And there's nothing wrong with ending a series where it naturally would end, and giving it a good solid ending. And sometimes while we were talking about your experience where people wanted more and you hadn't planned it, I've had the opposite happen. I wrote a long time ago, I started a YA series that I would envisioned to be this, massive series like Max Porter, just huge number of books. And I went on a blog tour back when blog tours were a big thing. And all the bloggers were like, oh, this is great, and great reviews. And I was like, oh, this is going to be huge. And nobody bought it. And so I had to I have to listen to my readers. And for whatever reason, they weren't into it. Now, I'm a hybrid author, but the majority of what I do is indie stuff. I have worked with presses in the past. This was an indie book, so both for the few people who find it and read it, as well as a gift to my son at that time was still in high school, and he had a friend, and she loved the book and kept wanting the next one. So I finally I took the time, knowing it was never going to sell well, and but it was a choice. I wrote a second book just to close out the story. So it is a complete duology. And anybody who finds it can read both and have a satisfactory story. But I mean, it sells like one book a year, maybe. It just does not sell. And so that's okay. I listen to them, and they want it. Right. I have another series, my thriller fantasy series, which I always describe as John Wick with immortality. But it's so it's this high action thriller. It's got this little fantasy twist, and that one ran about 13 books, yeah. And I had hoped it would keep going, and it does well, but it doesn't do great. It takes a real long time for each book to earn out, and too long. And so I closed out the story that we've been following, but I ended it with a way that, should it ever find its audience and really I can absolutely go on. And so when readers come to write to me or come to me and say, is there going to be more Nathan K? Is there going to be more Nathan K? I said, I would love to do more Nathan K, because I really would. I love the characters. I'd love to do it. But I need your help. I need you to go out and spread the word.
And help spread the word.
As an author can only do so much. There's only one of me, plus me saying, go buy my book, it's really good, is not nearly as effective as police going to somebody and saying, I read this book and you got to read it. That's worth so much more. And so, so that's what I've been telling my fans of that series. You want more of that series? You're going to have to get people, tell people to read it.
Get other people to read it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it just, they're not picking it up based on just me alone.
Well, let's flip this. You've told us about your personal. You've told us, how you've been doing this for years, and your wife and your son are involved on that journey. But how does the personal match the author? How does that entwine? I've read some of the background. Yeah, right. How does that pan out? I mean, I know you're from North Carolina. I know that you have, been here for a while,
Right.
but what else does Stuart Jaffe do?
So you just my personal life, or how it actually is
Yeah,
in the
your
book?
personal life that does not match. No one would think, and I don't want to say it because I already know it, but I don't want to say, what it is you do that people might say, really?
I'm trying. What do you mean, my band?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
yeah. So yeah, I play lead guitar in a blues band. Which there is a series I wrote called The Bluesmen. It's like 9 short stories that make one big story together about an old bluesman who creates magic with his music. Um, but yeah, I've been doing that for. I started playing guitar when I was 14 or 15. Picked up a guitar and taught myself to play. And it's, I quickly learned I was not going to be, a big rock star. And it was just something I've always enjoyed doing on my own. And then when I moved down to North Carolina, like 20 some years ago, um, just kind of as a hobby, I would audition and try to get in bands, and eventually got hooked up with a bassist named Tim, and he and I have been together ever since. We've been playing for close to over a decade now, and our band is the Bootleggers, and everybody else has come and gone. We've had all different singers and drummers and other guitarists, and we're just I'm often the youngest guy in the band. That's what I'm give you an idea what the band is.
Okay,
Bunch of
okay.
old guys who never made it as big musicians, just getting
Having a
together
good
once a week
time.
to play, and maybe once a month we go play at a bar or something and have a good time.
Okay, okay,
It's pure fun.
okay. So that's a
Um,
part. That's a part of your journey. That's a part of your journey
yeah,
to
sure,
be able
sure.
to, as an outlet. Do you suggest that most writers have an outlet?
Well, yeah, we're not. Nobody's a monolith or one thing. You, if you don't have a life, what are you going to write about?
Right.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, that's
um,
true. That's true.
that's and if all you do is sit home and watch shows, you're just going to become very, very derivative of it all. You got to have
Mhm.
some kind of interest, and hobbies and things. So yeah, I playing guitar is something I've done for a long time. And that's one thing I do that I enjoy. I don't do it anymore. I can't physically, but I used to do martial arts.
Mhm.
Um, I got to the level of being a second degree black belt in Taekwondo, and I would have gone further, but I had a knee injury when I was playing like just playing football with my friends in college, just stupid kind of thing. But it's kind of been with me my whole life, and I eventually had to have surgery on it, and basically, if I were to keep doing martial arts, I'd have to have my whole knee replaced eventually. So I
Mhm.
figured that's the end of my martial arts career.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
it was a lot of fun, and I like I said, I was a secondary black belt. I competed in the World Taekwondo Expo in Korea and had all kinds of neat experiences. And those experiences informed, like if you read the Nathan K books, there's a lot of stuff about hand-to-hand combat that's my personal knowledge.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
Stuff like that. Anything I do will find its way. An interest I have will find its way into a book, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay, so I
Mhm.
have two questions. First, what inspired the Max Porter series, and why do you think that it is as successful as it is?
well, I can answer the first part of that. The second one is who knows. Um, the first part, it began. I'd been living. My wife and I moved down to North Carolina. We were living up north in Pennsylvania. We moved down here because she was doing her getting her graduate degree at Wake Forest. So we lived in Winston Salem at the time, and I was still struggling to get my writing career going. I'd been writing short stories for a long time and getting in magazines and anthologies, but you can't feed your family off of that. And uh, I'm trying to just get the timeline in my head correct, but I'd written a few novels, and I had an agent. This was before indie publishing was viable. It was right on the cusp. And so I was going around the merry-go-round of getting rejections and all that kind of thing. And there were times when she, part of her duties as a graduate student was to teach all the 100 level courses. So there were many days where she would be at the university, and then I would come and essentially whatever, I'd pick her up and we'd eat, have lunch or dinner or something or whatever. And I would find myself at the university with like a half hour to kill before she was ready. And so I started hanging out at the library there. I could work. It was quiet. I could write. And for whatever reason, I got it in my head. We'd been living there for a year or so. And I'm like, I know nothing about Winston-Salem. I was just curious. So I went to the section in the library and I started looking up stuff. And I'm just flipping through this book and I stumble upon the story, and spoilers here for the first book, but it's been out for 12 years. So I think I'm allowed to say stuff. But I stumbled upon the story that during World War II, the soldiers were smoking cigarettes. The cigarettes were kind of a new thing, and people were smoking them so fast the soldiers were, because they were going to die, so they were smoking, and the military couldn't keep up with supplying the cigarettes. So the president of the United States contacted R.J. Reynolds, who ran R.J. Reynolds Tobacco out of Winston-Salem, and said, this is the problem. And he said to them, well, I can run my factories 24/7. I just don't have the manpower. What can we do about that? And so we shipped in a bunch of German POWs, set them up in a bunch of camps all over the state, like small little prison camps that would have at most 20 people in them. And then at night, they'd bust them all into Winston, have them work all night, and then get them out before anybody woke up. And I know plenty about World War II in that time period. And, I grew up knowing about that stuff. And I'm like, what? I never heard this. And there's pictures of this. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And so that was the part of the impetus for this series, because in the series, every book takes real history of this area that I live in, the whole triad of North Carolina, and I mix it with witches and ghosts and curses and all that. So finding any bit of history like this that's odd but not 100% well known or complete, where I can introduce magic if I want to, is perfect. And I've told this story many times. There was one year where I'm explaining all this to a crowd at a panel, and a guy came up afterwards and he goes, they did that in Texas too. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, I'm from Texas, and they did
wow.
This. I'm like, wow. So there were apparently a lot of states that were doing this, and nobody knows it. So,
nobody knows it. Yeah, nobody knows it.
So that was a big part of it. The other thing that was part of it, and any book I write, and certainly I think most authors, it's not one thing. It's you have this idea, and maybe this idea has been in your head for years, and this idea, and when they finally align, you're like, wait, all together they make a good idea. So there was that, which I found fascinating. At this point, like I said, I was on the merry-go-round and I wasn't getting any traction as a fantasy science fiction author. And my wife said, maybe you should just write a straight mystery. You love mysteries as well. Try that. So that's what I was trying to do when I wrote the book. I'm like, I'm just going to write a straight mystery. And then this ghost appears. And I'm like, I just can't not put in these kind of things. So
right.
But once I had this mystery planned out, I had this historical element, and now I had a ghost, and I put all three together, and that's what birthed the series. As far as what makes it so successful, I really don't know. If anybody knows, if anybody had that answer, there is no formula. If I knew what made Max Porter better, all my series would be following that formula, and everyone would be a hit. Yeah, but that's kind of the nature of art. There's no formula for music, for movies, for paintings, for any of it. And occasionally you stumble upon something like like Pixar when they first came out with Toy Story
Yeah.
for like a bunch of years, no matter as long as they followed that formula,
Yeah.
they had a hit. But
Yeah.
eventually, people just kind of get tired of it, and they
Tired of the hit.
no longer
That's
work.
right.
Same thing
That's
happened
right.
to the superhero movies, and they're still making them, but they don't hit like they did when it was all fresh and new. It's just the nature of art, and so I don't know. I know what elements make a Max Porter
Make it
book a Max
into
Porter
it,
book.
right?
Why those hit better than the YA book that I had to stop, I don't know, but I listen to my readers and I keep going with it.
Yeah, that's what you have to do. And not only that, the thing about it is, like you said, when you get a hit, I think for me as a reader and then as a writer, because I carried that over, we write what we like. We write what's comfortable for us. But the thing about it is as well, I like the reality in it. I like to have a touch of reality. I don't like it when it goes so far fetched that
Right.
I could look at it and go, well, that wouldn't happen. That's not, that to me, it's like the Star Wars when it first came out. It was so far fetched about us going to the moon and doing different things that I was like, well, wait a minute, we just got to the moon. How did we get where all of this other stuff is? And I had to remember Will Smith. In back when I was younger, it was about Will Smith and the robots and everything, and I was like, that would never happen. The Jetsons, we're living in the Jetson territory now, So there's some things that come in so early that we think of it as so far fetched that it never would happen.
Well, and it depends on your readership too. So Max Porter is a really good introduction for people who are unfamiliar with fantasy. I have a lot of readers who will write to me and say, they picked it up because of the mystery,
the mystery
aspect of it. It takes place. It's a contemporary story. It takes place now. It's got real history involved in it. All real things that are tangible, and they're like, I never knew fantasy could be this way. That they all think fantasy has to be Lord of the Rings.
So yes, it has to be so far fetched. I think I like the reality in it.
But
I like
also
that reality.
it just depends on the reader. There are plenty of readers, and I personally like all of it. So I'm happy to be in some fantasy other world that doesn't exist, and I love writing those worlds, and I've done that as well. But this is the one, the reality based stuff has probably a larger.
I think that pulled me in just into the synopsis of your book. That just pulled me in immediately. I was like, oh, I think I like this. Okay, I could see myself, liking this, but I can't see myself liking the vampire that comes out during the day. Vampires don't come out during the day. It's just, you have to, realistically, the era that we're living in becomes our era. Just one of those things where you go, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right.
It's funny you said that was one of the big difficulties when cell phones became a reality. That you can see if you watch television, you can just see where all the writers were like, wait a minute, what do we do now? Because it was always, I've got, I don't know, two cop partners, and one is over there on the city and one's way over here. They can't communicate. Aha, that's perfect. And now they can just go, hey, do you have the information? Yeah, I have the information. And it's like, oh no. So then this is why for like a decade there was a spate of basically no cop could get good cell service.
No communication, right? Right.
And now you occasionally you still get that, but it's harder and harder. Even if if your person's in the desert or in the mountains, it's hard to believe they can't get cell service.
Exactly.
Not anywhere in the world. So it's a constant problem, and you see that it's a problem we have in science fiction when we're writing far future stuff. Is okay. We're so highly technical now. What is that going to look like? It was relatively speaking much easier, when Isaac Asimov and them were writing science fiction in the 40s and 50s and 60s, when going to the moon had not happened yet. And so they could just the fact that you were traveling in space was like
Right.
mind blowing.
Right.
But now
Right.
that's nobody wants to know how you travel in space because we know what happens. So let's just move on. And
Yeah,
you
we
have
want
to
to know
come up
now
with
what
something.
did you see when you got there? What
Yeah,
was up there?
it gets really complicated.
Yes, yes. Well, I just want our audience to understand that as a versatile writer in the paranormal and the thrillers and the mysteries and everything else, that your books cross all the elements. And in doing that and touching all of those elements, I think that, like you said, that tells whether or not the readers are, attached and not attached. Do you find that you get more readers now that the system has changed? We just talked about the internet and the way that the book avenues go with audiobooks and
Sure.
ebooks, and you still can get your paperback and you still can get that. Do you see that people are pushing you for audiobooks?
Oh yeah. Well, everything I write, just almost I'd say 90 some percent of it is in audio already. I try and make my books available every way I could get them to you. So
Okay.
hardcover, paperback, ebook, audiobook. Plenty of people. Audiobooks are the biggest growing sector of publishing for the last couple of years now, 4 or 5 years. It just keeps growing and growing. People have busy lives. They're on the go, and they can have a book connected to their phone, connected to their earpods, and they're running or they're driving or wherever they're going. They're sick of hearing the same radio station. No matter what radio station they turn to, they all sound the same. Yeah, there's been a huge growth in that, and I don't care. People are like, wouldn't you rather they have the physical book? I'm like, the physical book, the ebook, the audiobook, those are just delivery systems.
Right.
What I wrote are the words, and how you get them is up to you. I just want you to experience the story and the have the experience I'm trying to get you to have. How you will, whether you go through a book, through sitting down quietly and reading or listening, or I don't care. I mean, go back over a little over 100 years, or I guess it's getting closer to 200 now, and people just told stories to each other, and they didn't actually read them. Most of them couldn't read anyway.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. So, being the business person that you are, you do have to understand the evolution of things and the timing of things and evolving that way, right? So, can you, like, off of the top of your head, recite every 70 book that you have read? I
Every
mean,
book
yes, every
I've
book.
written,
Yes. It's like
I'll put them
children,
in
right?
series.
It's like children, right?
So we've already talked about this series.
Mhm.
Nathan K is the John Wick, Jason Bourne kind of thriller with a fantasy twist, which is that he can have two souls. And I'll just leave it at that. There's the Parallel Society. That's a completed series at 7 books. That's about a gal who works in her family bookstore and learns that grandma and grandma's 2 elderly friends have been saving the universe for decades and decades. Hard to keep up with a bad back and arthritis, so they want her taking over and fighting all these monsters that come in. It's a contemporary fantasy that takes place now. I also wrote The Mother Chronicles, which is a completed series at 6 books. And that one is a post-apocalyptic fantasy where magic caused the apocalypse on its own world. So this is not for Nanette. It's a way out there kind of thing with magic and portals to other worlds. And I would say it's Mad Max meets Xena.
Okay.
And what else have I written? I wrote for Falstaff Books. I wrote a trilogy called The Midnight Mysteries, which is high fantasy and mystery brought together, where both get equal due. It's kind of like if Agatha Christie had tried her hands at writing Lord of the Rings knockoffs. And each book is an individual mystery and a different type of mystery genre, but we follow the same group of adventurers through the whole thing.
Okay.
I think those are all my series. Plus, there's the YA duology.
Uh-huh.
And then I have two standalone science fiction novels, After the
Mhm.
Crash, which is a survival on a wild planet story, and Founders, which is about a group that goes to colonize a new planet. And the book takes place several years after they've been there, and they start getting evidence that they're not the first humans there, which is not possible. So what's going on with that?
Mhm.
Like I already showed it, but there's this. This is going to be a complete series, but it's only one book right now. Second book will be out later this year. That's the Pathway Ring series, which is a generational novel following the same family through numerous generations as they are at the center of building the first ever Stargate, which is a wormhole thing that you can go through to somewhere else in the galaxy. And the thing that got that going is the idea that, well, yeah, you go through, but now you're stuck. You have to build another Stargate to come back.
Exactly.
And it's about that whole process, and it takes centuries of their, generations and generations, and it's a far-flung, crazy story. A lot of fun. I think that covers most of it. I'm sure I'm forgetting something.
Well, you did good.
You did real good, and it sounds
you
like you got another 70 books in you. Just
Yes.
I love what I do, and I get to do it all day. So yeah, it's that's
Yes.
the other thing. It's a lot easier to write lots of books. I do anywhere from 2 to 4 books a year usually, but I do it full time. I don't have to juggle that with another job, which makes it so much harder.
Makes it easier. You are so right. It's just the idea that you do what you like and you like what you do, and it doesn't seem like work. It just seems like you're having a good time at it.
And I get to talk to people like you, which is icing on the cake. Lots of fun.
Yes.
And seeing that I'm not scary.
No, not at all.
Yes, he looks like a normal everyday guy.
Yes. And I said the same thing when I watched Men in Black, and they opened up all of those people just changed over, and I was like, oh my God, what are they doing? But I enjoyed the story. So I enjoy you, Mr. Jaffe, and I'm quite sure our audience has enjoyed this interview. I want everybody, you got to do what I'm going to do and get into this Max Porter Paranormal Mysteries. Get into I just the idea that people were so engrossed in it. When I read the reviews, I was like, oh boy, now I'm in trouble, because now I gotta buy these books. I gotta get these books. So I appreciate you and what you do. And people, I want you to know you can get in touch with him. Go to his website, www.stuartjaffe.com. He's also on Facebook, author Stuart Jaffe. So make sure you get in touch. If this type of reading and this type of writing is your thing, know that he's very, very, very good at what he does. And we appreciate you so much for coming. Felice, you want to give him that last question that we ask all of our visitors?
Yeah, and probably he gave it away already. But Mr. Jaffe, we ask everyone that in the plethora of books that you write and the things you do, I love that, in your personal life, you do a couple of different things. One thing we didn't touch on, but in all of that, we ask you to share with us what fills your cup. Sometimes doing all the things we do empties us out. So what do you do to fill your cup?
Well, this is going to sound a little cheesy, but I have my wife.
Aww,
spend time together.
I've heard so far. Well, next to God. But so you have your wife.
This year is our 30th wedding anniversary. So definitely the cup runneth over this year.
Yes.
So much.
That's good. Yes. Understanding the support and everything else that you give each other. You give to each other, knowing that you were at a library while she was doing her thing, and she's your reader and ear when you're doing your thing. Those things, that give and take thing in a marriage is so important. Hey, I get pushed all the time, and a knock on the door that goes, hey, it's time for you to turn in. You've been here too long, So yeah, he'll come to the door and just tap on the door real nicely and say, hey, it's time. You've been in here too long. So I appreciate the fact that you acknowledge that, because we do need that close support. We need that. We need that in our corner. But I want to thank you for being our guest and being here with us tonight. We appreciate you and what you do. And I can't wait to run into you again and see where you are in your journey. And like I said, I'm definitely going to pick up the Max Porter thing, because I want to find out about this. He sounds like a bad boy waiting to happen. So I want to find out who he is and what he does. So do you have any last words for our audience?
Just happy reading to all of you, and thank both of you for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
You're more than welcome.
More than welcome. More than welcome. Definitely enjoyed it. So, audience, until next Monday, we're going to tell you have a good week, stay blessed, and be safe. And thank you so much, Mr. Jaffe, again, for being our guest on IPEN Podcast, Interviews and Conversations.
Yay. Good night, everyone. Thanks for joining us.